we've said, but now we have two Gemaras about it, two cases, and the two Yesodis are again about how to determine pricing. Okay, so we have two sugyas over here. We have two sugyas that are very interesting in this union of how to determine pricing. Okay, one thing that we kept on mentioning. Okay, let's just get to the case. The case is a Gemara, it's a Bryson, but Metzia, Nun Alpha, Medbeis, Hanoise v'noisem be'emuna, ein lo alav ayna. Someone that does business, be'emuna, ein lo alav ayna. There's no ayna. What does emuna mean? So Rashi says, and they're trying to basically say this is what it means, and it's pretty common, is that the person says, look, I'm just a middleman. This is what I bought it for, and I'm selling it to you for my cost plus 10%. Now, it turns out that his cost, he gufa got hayna. The middle guy was nisaneh from the original moicher. Then maybe the original moicher was a guy, or something of that, something like that. So therefore, it's irrelevant. He doesn't really care if he got nisaneh because he knows he's just going to sell to the next. He's just the middle guy, so he doesn't really care if he overpaid. But it turns out he overpaid, and then he transferred that ayna to the third person. So since he told him, look, I am selling it to you, I'm selling it to you for whatever I bought plus my cost plus 10%. So Rashi says there's no ayna there. Okay? Rashi says there's no ayna. The Shulchan brings Rashi, and he says, so for example, let's say you send some. Let's say there's a big show in Vegas for cameras, whatever. So you don't go there. You send the guy, and he buys all sorts. And you say, look, go to this thing and sell me, and get me what you can, and resell it to me. And the guy says, fine, but I'm not just going to go spend a week doing nothing. So he says, yeah, you can charge me whatever it is, plus 5%. And it turns out that some of the stuff that he bought was ayna, even though over there everyone that's selling it is yidden, but whatever. So the whole thing is your friend over there. So the point is that there will be no ayna on the middle guy, because look, I'm buying and I'm selling. Okay? That's Rashi's pshat. L'maisa, the mechaber, if we're going to read the lashon mechaber, listen carefully, and the achronim are medayik that maybe the mechaber says a little different than Rashi. Hanoisem be'emuna, ein lo alav ayna, keitzad, chayfetz zeh bekach v'kach lekachtiv. I bought this item for this amount of money. V'kach v'kach ani mistaker boy, and I'm making 10%. Ein lo alav ayna. This is lashon of the Rambam. So the Sma points out that the Rambam is saying you actually have to speak out the price, the details. I'm selling it to you for $100. I bought it for $90, and I'm charging you an extra 10. So in other words, according to the Rambam, you have to actually speak out everything. So the Sma says it's true, but we pass it like Rashi anyway. Even though that's what it says the Sma, Hatur, Kosav, Yesh Mefarshim, Afil Lo Yamar Lo Bekach V'kach Lekachtiv. Elam L'tein Li Chayv V'tzeh K'mo Shekanisa Yisai. So the Sma brings down Rashi. But the Rambam, the Mechaber doesn't bring down Rashi. He just says that, no, I'm telling you the price is 100, and the reason for my price is because this is what it costs. So a lot of times you go to a store, right? So in a way, there's a kula and a chumrah in both shitas. Let's say you go to a store. This is very often the case, right? And you start negotiating with the guy. So he says, fine, look, but I can't go lower than this. This is partial. I can't. I won't. This is what I paid for it. I'm telling you, right? I'm just charging you my cost, basically, right? So now, okay, so you go for that price. So he says, this is your cost plus whatever, and then it turns out that it's still ayna because his cost was ayna. His cost was too expensive. So L'maisa is not going to be ayna because he told you that. He told you this is basically my cost. You said, okay, I trust you that this is your cost. I'm buying it because this is the cost, and there's no ayna. The question is, what's the chiddush over here? So the emes is that really there's two different. The lomdus could be different between these two cases. The pshat is like this. When the guy tells you, I don't know if it's a fair price, it's not a fair price. I'm charging you my cost plus this. I got to just do business. So the Mefarshim say that the yesod of the heter is similar to the heter that we had before. We mentioned this heter a few times. Is that the whole din of Einah is when the assumption of the transaction is we're paying the price, the value. But if you're not dealing with the value, you're dealing with, look, I got to make some profit, cost it. You're coming in on a whole different. We're not dealing with the value of the item. I want the item. You have it. You're willing to pass it on to me, but you have to make some money on the deal. We're approaching the transaction a different way. We're not approaching it b'teras the shavius. We're approaching it b'teras. I'm a middle guy. I bought it. I'm selling it to you. I'm passing it on to you. So the lashon of the Piskei Teshuva ki alokech eina yoyer klal al shivui hamekach. He's not worried about the shivui, the value. Because he knows that this seller is not selling it for the value. He's selling it for what he needs to make his profit margin on it, and you're okay with that. So memela, it's what in the case of Rashi, maybe there'll be a different heter. We'll get to in a minute. So this is I think a pretty negedika case, and therefore any time that this is what's going on, because look, is this came out what I bought it for, yeah, I'm trying to get rid of it, but like I can't take a loss on it. If I go lower than this, I'm taking a loss on it. Okay, so first of all, by the way, the Mefarshim say, the poskim say that if he says that, he can add into the price some of his cost. The shipping cost and the cost, some of his costs, he can say, look, I'm going to take a loss if I sell it to you for less. And if it's true that he'll take a loss or he won't make enough of his profit margin to make it worth it, then if the reason why there's a no is because his original price was too much, there's not going to be a no here on the second guy. Okay? Now, what happens if the nesivis is mesupik? Is this only talking about when the seller doesn't really know the true value? He doesn't really know that he got a bad deal. Like the case of the guy in the shuk. I don't know. You sent me to Vegas. I bought stuff. I'm buying stuff and I'm selling it to you. I don't really know the market. I don't know what the best deal you could get. I bought stuff and I'm selling it to you. Okay. But what if the middle guy knows that he was Nisana already once? Now he's trying to recoup it. So he says, look, I was the sucker the first time and I got Nisana the first time. So now this is a good deal for me. I'll find someone else and say, look, this is what I paid. I'm charging you what I paid plus 10%. So is he allowed to pass on the Einah to the next person? Or is this heter talking that they don't really know? So the Nesivis is very... So it sounds like schar tircha you're not allowed, but other overhead to run the store you would be allowed.
That really goes with the shabbos of any shaykhs. Anything that's bought and sold, the seller is incorporating his overhead cost into what he's selling.
Into the price, what it cost him. I think it's what it cost him for this, but it's what it cost him for him.
There's also the experience. There's some places you can go online and buy something for $10. You can go to the store and get the full experience on how to use it. A better one.
Okay, fine, that's something else. I'm just talking about... Right. But here we're talking about a specific setup where you're kind of just passing on the cost, and your cost was too expensive. Right?
So if you say they don't sell at a loss, and basically trying to charge your general profit margin, so
well, because if you sell everything at what it cost you, then you can't run a business. You're saying this is the lowest I can go based on what I bought it. This is what I bought it. My cost was expensive on this item. My cost was expensive on this item.
If you're saying it's less than I'm selling at a loss,
that's a loss. That's what he's saying. Selling it at what it cost you to buy this item could be still a loss for you in general. You could say, look, I can't sell it for cheaper. This is the lowest I can go because my cost on this item is very expensive. Now, if the reason why it ends up being expensive, I know, is because the cost that you paid for it was Einah, then it's mutter. That's what we're saying. Now, the only suffix is if you know that you were nisana and you're dafka doing it to recoup your loss on the item, could be that that's not okay. That's the nesiva says. Okay, so it has to be that, like, look, I'm not getting into it. It's a hard market out there. This is what I got. You want it or not? You know, fine. Now, what happens if the guy's lying? This is a very important shaila. Maisim b'chol yoyim. Right? The guy says, I just look, you know, whatever. The whole story that I just said, just it's not true. Right? Oh, this is what it cost me, and my cost is a lot on this. I can't, whatever. Or, right? So what's the halacha there? And what we're saying is the buyer thinks that, look, this is not nis'aneh. I'm not doing ayna. He's just passing on the ayna to me or whatever. I'm willing to pay the price because that's the way he's selling the item. What happens if he's lying? So there's two shilas. One is it a mekach tois altogether? And if it's not a mekach tois, is it ayna? Okay. So the Taz talks about a different case. That's takamaisim b'chol yoyim. That if a person says, look, I just got an offer on the house for 500. So, you know, if you match it right now, I'll give it to you. Right? So, and you pay it, and it turns out that he never had that offer to begin with.
Is there no one know about karka?
No, you know, but there's mekach tois. Mekach tois. If I bought it on false premises, I bought it on the premise that I had to chop it, because if I didn't chop it now, someone else was going to take it, and there was already an offer on the table, and there was no offer on the table, right? So is that? Can you tie a mekach tois? Can you tie it was a mistake? I would have never bought it had I known the truth. So that the Taz says that there's no mekach tois because you're basically a fool. You're an idiot. You think that it's true? This is the way they do business. Even in the days of the Taz, this is the way they did business. This is what Taz says. He says, that's the derech of soichrim, that they talk until they convince you to buy it. So if you believe everything the guy says, you know, obviously you bought it because you wanted to buy it. You can't tie a mekach tois. You can't tie a mekach tois because the guy told you, oh, I only bought on that premise that I thought that there was already other offers on the table. No, there's no mekach tois on that. And hu adin l'chayra, if the guy tells you, look, I paid this much, and the only way I could sell it to you is if you pay me this much, and it turns out he didn't pay that much, there'll be no time of mekach tois on that. Mekach tois means it's I bought on a false premise, so I could totally invalidate the sale. So you don't say it's mekach tois. You don't say it's invalidating the sale based on that premise. It's not called you bought it on the false premise. However, you lose the heter in onah that we just talked about. So there's 2 points. One is, I bought something on the wrong premise. That's the next sugya we're going to deal with, is when you buy something on the false premise. You think it's A, it turns out to be B. Okay? That's a separate sugya. We're talking now, I thought I bought A, and I did buy A. Problem is, I overpaid. So now, the guy tells you, I'm selling to you for $100 because my cost is $90, and I'm charging you an extra $10. Turns out his cost was $50, and he's making a killing over here. Okay? So is there a mekach tois? There's no mekach tois. You can't say, well, I only bought it for $100 because I thought it cost you $90. No, you have to know that this is the way people do business. Since this is the way two people do business, you can't just claim and say I bought it on a false pretense. However, but now the guy overcharged you. So now there's onah. Now he had no right to charge you $100 for an item that's really worth $70 in the shop. The reason you were willing to overpay because he told you this is what I paid for it. So fine. So that's the way. But if he didn't pay for it that way, then there would be mekach tois. Then there would be onah, as long as and it would have to fall into a 16%. If it's more than 16% or above, you'll be able to be mevatel the mekach or get back your money. So that's the way it would break. It would this thing would break down. Okay? Okay, so that's l'chora this sif. Now, in the meanwhile, the Taz here, the Piskei Tshuva brings another heter for the case of Rashi. The case of Rashi was that you didn't tell him the price. You didn't say it's $100 because I paid $90, and you just said, look, I have an item here. It's a good item. It's valuable. I'm going to pass it on to you with 10%. But you didn't say the price. You didn't talk about the price. And the guy says, fine, look, I'm in the business of buying watches. I'm going to buy a watch from you. And the guy says, look, I have a good watch. I have this and this watch. And I just got it from wholesale. I'll sell it to you plus for my cost plus 10%. And then you get the thing in the mail with the invoice. You're like, what? You crazy? I'm not paying that. So it's way overpriced, right? So Rashi says that that's not onah because he told you it's my cost plus 10%. You didn't add, right? So what's the heter there? It's the same heter. So there's another knech, and this is what we're going to introduce now is a very, very important concept. Basically, in the Sefer Minchas Asher from Rav Asher Weiss in Eretz Yisrael, he basically uses this concept to. We're ending with this concept, but he starts with this concept. In his tshuva about Ainah, which is in Chelek Gimel, he has a tshuva about Ainah. In his tshuva, he basically brings this concept, the following what we're going to bring in, and he basically says, based on that concept, there's no Ainah nowadays. Pretty much, it's a good thing we didn't start with that concept, because then there'll be no need for the rest of the shurim. But he basically introduces this. A lot of places can disagree with that, but, okay, here's the case. It's a very interesting case and a very interesting question. The Beis Yosef asks the question. Okay, the case is that a guy comes to you and he says, and he has a box of wheat, and he says, I'm selling you this box of wheat for $10. Okay, now the Rambam is talking that you don't know how much wheat is in there. You don't know how much wheat is in there. So the first question is, can you do that transaction? Can you do a transaction on something that's Eina Mesuyim? You don't really know what's in there. Just like, I can't sell you, here's $10 for whatever you want to give me. There's no das. So the Rambam says, no, there's a box of wheat. It's called das. The fact that you don't know how much is in there is not ma'akiv. The fact that it's considered you know what the transaction is about, pertaining to. What? And you see what it is. If, however, the amount of wheat in there is not, it doesn't justify the price, so the Rambam says it will be onah. It's called a sale, but there's onah if the value doesn't match up. So there's onah even on such a case. So the Beis Yosef asks a question, okay? And it's a question from a sugya regarding ribbis. In ribbis, we spoke about last month, we spoke about prepayment. You pay now to get something later. So one of the cases is you have a farmer, he's going to his goats, and he's about to milk the cow, the goats. So he goes to the goat, and he says, whatever's about to come out of the goat, I have a whole flock of goats, you can buy all the milk. So he says, how much? So he says, prepay, I'll give it to you for $100. You can have all the milk. So the Gemara says it's mutter. The Gemara says it's mutter. Now the Gemara is saying it's mutter, it's not ribbis. Even though you're prepaying and you may get more milk than what you paid, it's not ribbis. But Frekta Beis Yosef, but I don't understand the whole shaila. L'chayra, once you pick up the milk, and if it's more than what you paid, there's onah, according to the Rambam. So,
You took the risk.
Less than six.
Okay.
When you go for matzah baking, you're renting it a half hour, you're renting it an hour. You have no clue how much you're going to get.
No, okay, fine. Good. So let's talk about, so you're talking about Ainah by matzahs. I was going to talk about Ainah by Sroigim. May as well talk about it by Chanukah, you know. So the Beis Yosef asks a kasha. He says, I don't understand, why is there not onah over here? So the Beis Yosef is mechadish a new yesod in onah from that kasha, and he says that there's something called davar she'ein lo shar yadua, something that has no set value. What things don't have a set value? Things that each one is different. So in those days, let's say you say, how much is a cow worth? I mean, how much is a cow worth? There's no two cows that are the same. This one's big, this one's small, this one's old, this one's young, this one's fat, this one's skinny. It's like Yosef's dream. I'm saying, like, there's no price for a cow. It's like used cars. You can compare and use, there's a scale, but no two used cars that are the same at the end. You could say there's a scale that, well, if it's this year, this year plays this role and this thing plays that role, but ultimately there's no two that are the same. Right? There's like so he said in the Gemara, like, or a custom or a talis. The case of clothing. So in those days, what was clothing? You went to someone, you said, the person looked at you and said, I'll go into my house and my wife will make you a shirt. There's no two shirts that are the same. No two cows are the same. So since there's no shar, there's no price for a cow, Memela says the Beis Yosef, there's no ona on cows. There's no ona on cows, which is good for the used car salesman people. There will be no ona because there's no, you can't go and pinpoint a price for it. It means anything made in mass, an Apple iPad or iPhone. So there's a price for it. Now it could be that this year, but there's a set market for these things. They're made and they're priced. But things like a part of a talus, there's no set price for it. There's no price for that. Okay. So now says the Beis Yosef, there's no price for the milk of a goat. Every flock is different. Every goat is different. So since there's no price for it, there's no ona. Which the Minchas Osher wants to say, based on the Beis Yosef, there's no pricing for things nowadays. Now I don't know what he's talking about because there's pricing. He's saying is because things fluctuate a lot, and you could go to two websites and the same item could be, but it's a very schwer Zushtel he's making because our items do have, and Ramosha Sternbach argues and others that our items do have set price. But this is what he says. Now there's another reason why it's a very schwer psak, because the Ramah argues on this Beis Yosef. And the Ramah says there's no price for a cow because every cow is different. But at the end, like you said, once I choose which cow I'm buying, there is a price for that one. You'll figure out a system to price each cow individually. So if I ended up buying the one I ended up buying, that one has a set value, a way to evaluate it. And how can you charge me ona on this one if there is a price for the one that I ended up buying? You hear what I'm saying? There's no set price for cows. But each cow, once you choose which one you're using, you could evaluate it and get to a price. So how could you overcharge me on the cow that I ended up choosing? That's the Beis Yosef's kasha. So Beis Yosef, the Ramah's kasha. So the Ramah argues, and the Shach and the Sma, everyone argues on this Beis Yosef, and basically says, so the Minchas Osher says, yeah, but the guy that did the ona could say, I hold like the Beis Yosef. Kimli ke Beis Yosef, so I hold like the Beis Yosef, and Choshen Mishpat, you're allowed to do that. In other areas of halacha, you can't learn a sugya, and Mishnah Berurah paskins that it's also, and you say, well, I hold this motor. You and I can't do that. Chazon Ish and Moshe Feinstein can do that, but we can't do that. But in Choshen Mishpat, you could do basically a shita that's brought down. You could say, I'm following that. Why? Because the other person needs a strong proof to be moitzi from you. So you could say kimli. So the Minchas Osher says you can say kimli. Okay. And I said the application of the Beis Yosef is very schwer over here anyway. But the Ramah argues, and the Ramah says that there is ona in things that don't have a set market value because each one has a market value. But there's another heter, which is what you said, which is the Taz says this heter, and the Taz says, I mean, what's the question to begin with? The guy made a deal and said, whatever comes out of your flock of the milk today, I'm going to buy. Now, it ended up being a lot more or a lot less or whatever. Let's say it ended up being a lot more. So, and therefore, the lokeach got a good price. But that's because he took a risk. So the price incorporated in it the risk factor. You didn't know exactly what you were going to end up with. So the price incorporated the risk because it could be I would end up with a lot more or I would end up with a lot less. So when you're incorporating a risk because you don't quite know what you're going to end up with, there's no ana on that. Right? So that's the Taz's Yisod, which seems to make a lot of sense, right? When you're buying something you don't quite know what it is, even if you end up with more or less, there shouldn't be ona. This we discussed last week with the case when in the closing there was a warehouse and they didn't want to go through the hassle of cleaning out the warehouse. So the seller said, if you add $10,000 to the price, I'll sell you the warehouse with everything inside. And it turned out that the stuff inside the warehouse was worth a lot more than $10,000. But it could have been, it was worth less. So if you incorporate the risk, it could be that there's a heter there, if you don't know what it is. So the Pischei Tshuva brings in, so there's two reasons essentially to argue on the Beis Yosef. One reason to argue on the Beis Yosef is the whole thing is shver. What do you mean there's no price? There's a price for this item. The second thing, your whole kasha is from a case of Mashiach Cholvos, which is not a good kasha, because over there, the reason he was allowed to pay whatever he was going to pay was because there was a risk factor. Okay? Now, this Indian of the risk factor, the Pischei Tshuva brings down, maybe that's pshat back over here, that's pshat in Rashi. Rashi said, you go to a guy, and he says, look, I got this great watch, I got it from a wholesaler out in Germany or whatever, and I know you collect watches, I'll sell it to you, for my price, plus whatever, 5%. And then you get it and it's overpriced, so it's mutter because there was a risk factor there. There was a certain amount that you didn't know, you thought you were getting a good deal. There was a very good chance that you were going to get a deal because he was selling it to you for wholesale. So you thought that you were going to get a much better deal than retail on this. Now it turns out that this guy himself got a bad deal and he passed it on to you, assuming he's saying the truth, right? So the Pischei Tshuva says that based on that taz, you could be mounted this also. Look, there's a risk factor. The fact that you ended up overpaying was because you were willing to take the risk and maybe you were going to get a good deal.
It might not be a good comparison. So when you're selling the watch, you know what it's worth. But milk, you don't know.
Who, the seller?
Yeah.
See, the seller is the Nesivus, his case. If the seller himself knows that he got a bad deal and just trying to hand it off to someone else, then that's different. But let's say the seller's not involved in that.
But a cow, you don't know how much milk you're going to grow. You know.
A lot of times, people have this. It's like, I do business with someone, he has access to a certain deal. I don't need the deal, but I'll be the broker for it, I'll pass it on to you, and it ends up being a bad deal. Okay, it's not, you thought it was a good deal. It's not my problem.
I don't know why there's even a question. It's a watch. It has a value you could look up. And a wholesale price, you know what the wholesale price is, and you know what the retail markup is. So wouldn't it be...
So why'd the guy buy it? Why'd the buyer say... The seller, he didn't ask him how much it was. The seller said, I'm getting this good shipment of watches in wholesale from Germany. I'm getting it in today. I'll sell it to you, Mom said, wholesale price. I'll sell it to you a price I got plus... Obviously, whatever, I'm in the middle, so I'll add on 5%. That's a sure, no problem. He doesn't ask for the price.
He heard the word wholesale.
He heard the word wholesale, he went wild. And it turns out it was a bad deal.
Why is it a smachta?
No, it's not a smachta because...
Betting that it's worth more.
A smachta is very complicated. We were thinking about... A smachta means that it didn't exist now. But this is different. This is something you could have been mevayer also. So it's like... You're willing to put your das on that.
Doesn't he have a certain amount of time he can evaluate it and then
yes.
come back?
Yes.
And say that,
but that's only if it's considered onah. But in this deal, we're not considering it onah. Because when you do something based on the trust of the seller, you're going in on those terms. Once you're going in on those terms, it becomes that it's mutter. So you don't have time anymore. It's chal the sale. You're saying, why didn't the guy look it up? So you answer my question. Why didn't he look it up? Because he doesn't really, like you said, he doesn't care that much about the price. He thinks he's getting a better deal than everyone else. Right?
Downward, you wouldn't have been upset.
What?
If it would have been a downward, if it would have been...
Right. If you would have gotten a good deal and you said to the guy, look, if you would be in retail, you could sell this for double what you got it for. Why are you selling it, So it's not about the price now. So once you're in that type of situation, so it's noisim and noisim be'amuna, so then that becomes that you don't have a claim on the price. So memela it's mutter to do that, even according to Rashi, and the lumdus would be like that other lumdus of davar she'en lo shar yadua. So by the way, based on that Beis Yosef of davar she'en lo shar yadua, that there are no two that are the same. We get back to that age-old question of Esrogim. So there's a tshuva in the Sefer Beis Yitzchak, that he says that even though that an esrog is literally like this case of the Beis Yosef, because every esrog, there's no price for an esrog, but every esrog has a price. right? So there's a market for it. Now, and Memela, according to the Beis Yosef, there wouldn't be a no. Now, if that's your only heter, it's a weak heter, but definitely you have that Beis Yosef also. Okay. In a lot of the Tshuva Sfarim, they talk about these types of things when you're relying on the seller or whatever. But the bottom line of what we're saying is if that you didn't ask for the price or you're relying on the seller told you this information and it's correct, like the Lashon and the Nesivos, there's no no when you're buying al ha'emes. A no is when you're not buying al ha'emes. But if that was what you cost and you told him that's what it costed you and he's willing to buy it, then there'll be a no. There would not be a no, okay? So I think pretty much this wraps up no. So I think the next sugya we're going to talk about is similar, but it's a whole another set of halachas, is when there's mekach tos. Mekach tos means that you actually ended up with a different item than what you said you were going to sell. It's defective or something of the nature. Okay? So we'll be in touch. Right, it's not a price thing. It's not a price thing. It's that you ended up with a different item. Okay? So we'll be in touch about the next few weeks. There's Hanukkah and there's other things going on. I'll put on the chat, whatever, but Mr. Shem will continue. Okay, thank you.
In the risk factor, if someone rents the matzah bakery for 3 hours and there's a power outage, then it's the responsibility.
I don't think the matzah factory, hello, that's more like a rental. Shkoyach. That's more like a...
Going to the sale, that's
what?
That doesn't go to the sale, that...